Parthaya pratibodhitam bhagavata narayanena swayam vyasena gratitam purana munina madhye mahabharatam advaita amrita varshinim bhagavatim ashtadasha adhyayinim ambatva manusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim. O Mother, Bhagavad Gita, I repeatedly meditate on you who are the 18 chapters in the middle of the Mahabharata composed by the ancient sage Vyasa, taught for the benefit of Partha Arjuna, us, by the Lord Narayana himself, the goddess, the shower of the nectar of Advaitam, the enemy of rebirth. So let's do a little revision of our values. And these are, by the way, values to be asked, which one of them has area which I can incorporate into my life? Where are there areas, blind spots, that could be filled with these values? So they're not just a discussion, they're something to ask ourselves, where and what places and what values could I specifically practice for, let's say, 1 month? And you assign yourself 1 month. So this is work. That's the reality. So whatever value you feel you're lacking or you're attracted to, that is your value. That's how you know. That first impression, that is your friend. Amanitvam, absence of conceit. This is releasing the need to announce one's skills, to make them out explicitly loud, right? Oh, by the way, did you know that I did this and this and this? It's out of context. It has no place. So releasing this need to say something about ourselves or catching ourselves just to kind of inflate our status, our image of ourselves. So we just need to catch ourselves. We're not saying that we're all perfect in all of these values. There are improvements. Sometimes we leak out these qualities, so that it means there's space for improvement. So where am I, in what areas do I find myself the need to announce myself to appear, to appear validated, to appear acknowledged? That is the area that you look into. Just be yourself. Just do whatever you do, whatever you're good in. Get involved in that. Others will notice you. Right? No need to announce it. In fact, the intelligent minds will pick you out even if you're the silent type. So you don't need to say what you are, who you are. Minds will still pick it up. It also doesn't mean remain silent, because we also go to the other extreme, right? We say, oh, just be super humble now. Don't say anything about yourself. If you had this kind of attitude, would you have the kind of opportunities that you have today? No. So there's a fine line between, yes, the world wants to hear a little bit about your story, wants to see your talent. If we don't announce ourselves, if we don't promote or advertise ourselves, then we're not going to attract opportunities. And it's opportunities that help us grow. So there's always two sides. We can go one extreme, be super humble, don't say anything, none of it is mine. Or the other is mention wherever it is due to be said, but don't fall into the need to say over and over and over again. So there's always a fine line. Amanitvam, absence of the need to keep repeating one's glories about themselves. Being yourself, immerse yourself in your talent, in your show. People will recognize it. At the same time, don't turn this into the extreme of keeping quiet. The world sometimes needs to hear and see your talents. The musician, for example, they announce themselves, and as someone, composer, captures them and they say, "You're great. Come into our recording studio." The musician goes, and the musician gets the deal. They're lucky. Why? Because they put themselves out on YouTube, out into the world. But then it goes into the extreme. Now the musician concludes, I'm here because I've advertised myself. So now let me keep on advertising myself. So it goes into the other extreme. Now advertising oneself becomes the end. loss of perspective. It initially turned into a means just to show yourself, and now the person's lost, and now it becomes the entire end of life, being out there. Value 2, adambhitvam, absence of pretense. This involves monitoring our speech, because we're always speaking. In fact, what we say is our direct giveaway of what we're thinking. No need to look into your subconscious mind. Just listen to your own speech. That's our own self-therapy. Just listen. What's coming out of these words? What's coming out of this mouth? What kind of words are they? Are they exaggerated? Are they filling in extra details that didn't originally happen? So whenever we capture ourselves inserting details in the hopes to make ourselves more lovable, then we just simply restore and we make it more realistic, right? While you're making the mistake, you're also correcting. That's the beauty of conversation, of relationship with a client, with an intimate partner. While we're saying it, we capture ourselves. We say, ooh, I inserted a detail that actually I'm exaggerating. Now, let me just bring it back down to earth. Therefore, value 2, amanitvam, absence of the need to amplify, exaggerate in the hopes of receiving more love. In fact, how are quality relationships built? Being perfect? No, because we don't relate to people that are being perfect. We relate to vulnerabilities, showing mistakes. Therefore, no need to exaggerate, no need to show oneself as a perfect individual who never makes mistakes, because that's how human beings relate. We make mistakes. That's what connects us. The only perfect being is Ishvara. Not one human being is going to be perfect. We all have limitations one way or the other. Value 3, ahimsa, saintly, holy thoughts, saintly words, saintly actions. Asking yourself, what is my intention behind this? Is it to throw light onto realities, or is it to be right? What is the intention behind what I'm about to do? What is the intention working with my client? What is the intention before filling in this report? What is the intention for filing this complaint? To throw light, to provide feedback, or to demonstrate how you know better? What is the intention behind our actions? That is the one question that we need to keep in mind. That's a nice wallpaper question on the phone. What is my intention behind what I'm about to think, do, or say? Ahimsa is also dynamic. For example, sometimes we have no intention of hurting. We give some feedback, and yet we still hurt. Ooh, unpleasant. And we, in this little kind of can't get out of a situation, like, whoa, how did I find myself in this? You know, this feeling? You're just saying this bubble. Suddenly you appear in this little zone and you're like, how did I get myself into this? And the intention was never to hurt. It just turned out that way. Because sometimes we do provide feedback, but it's still misinterpreted on the other side. Or it's triggered, the other person gets triggered. And now they confront us. And now we have to address that because you're the one who initiated it in the first place. So my question is, how do we handle when we provide our sincere opinion and then it just turns into an unpleasant confrontation? What are some ways of addressing this kind of situation, which we all have experienced?
Yeah, I find that has happened to me numerous times. I find it useful to say, I don't think I put that very well, and I understand what made you angry. Let me see if I can rephrase that. And then I'll try and put it more gently.
Okay.
And I'll try to put it in a more gentle way.
Yeah, perhaps that you create as much space around the problem as you can. Like, you don't need to respond immediately to every situation. Some that you can delay your response and give yourself some thinking time.
Good. So what David's saying is sometimes when we're confronted, then we don't even understand what specifically was the original specific part that created the situation. So we need time to reflect upon that. So something that we can do is, what specifically compelled me to say this in the first place, as Robert was saying. So, we need to be clear ourselves. What specifically made you initially say that statement, because of which this entire situation now ensued? Do we even know? Now, if we get confronted, usually we're not given time to think ourselves, as David was now mentioning. So we can also say, oh, hold on, let me just give me a moment. Let me just go over this in my own head to make sure that I can reply sensibly. Right? Because confrontation is kind of like, we just fall into it and then we feel compelled to answer immediately. One of the parties, either you or the other, has to keep returning back to the original thread, to the original point that instigated the entire conversation or the argument. Because what happens is our minds are flexible. Suppose the other person misinterprets, and now they start to say a different set of keywords. And those keywords now cause you to remember something else, right? Because they trigger your own mind to remember and draw references to something else that is related to those keywords. Now, in order to respond to those keywords, you have to now take your own memory base and then respond back. You're responding back in those new keywords, and then you're providing new keywords to that person, who then also has to take some other keywords, and then therefore more and more we keep on diverting from the original thread. This is how mind so easily falls for whatever is going on now. That's why one or the other has to keep reminding him, wait, what was the initial topic of discussion? Else the mind is left, right, up, down. This is just naturally how minds are. So we need to keep training our minds to return back to the original thread. Value 4, kshantihi, accommodation. This involves accepting, being okay with the uncomfortable tension that is arising right now. Suppose you're in an uncomfortable tension right now with someone, with yourself even, and therefore accepting that uncomfortable tension that's occurring right now, and then working with that, saying, this is the new template, this is the new reality, this is what is happening right now. What's the other choice? Rejecting it. It shouldn't be like this. It should be different. It should be better. I shouldn't be feeling like this. I shouldn't be having this discussion. So then we start inserting, philosophizing how this shouldn't be true right now. So life is presenting one thing, right? The rain's falling. But our mind goes, nah, it shouldn't be raining right now. It should be sunny. Your mind is a part of life. Life is not a part of your mind. Life has precedence. I can think about wanting the sun to be shiny and clouds to be moved away, but what's the reality? They're not. It's raining. Life has precedence. In that same way, accommodation is accommodating life instead of accommodating my own thoughts, how it should be and shouldn't be. If it's raining, to accommodate that means let's work with what is. It's raining. To not work with it, that is a lack of kshanti, is to say, or it's basically to complain how it shouldn't be. Let's change cities. Melbourne's no good, or whatever city you live in, right? And this is too cold, etc. Right? So now we're working with whatever we are surrounded by. Fun fact: most want liberation, at least the ones who are following this path, right? We want liberation. Okay. Out of those most, how many are willing to accommodate the relative limited person with the shortcomings, the limited jiva? Right? So we want liberation. I want a big vision. But out of those many, how many are willing to accommodate the self shortcomings? I'm not good enough. I don't love myself. I'm not good in this. I wish I was more. Think about this. Accommodating the relative person, out of the question. I want liberation. But what is liberation? Accepting that the limited person the one with the shortcomings, by the way, he or she is Atma. Where's the question of Atma being somewhere over there? Jiva, Ishvara, Aikyam. The little Jiva with the shortcomings, that very Jiva is Ishvara. But we're unwilling to accommodate that Jiva, the Jiva with the shortcomings. That's why I say it's hard work. Easy to say, I want liberation. Let's talk about liberation. But how many are willing to say, do I accept this limited person completely? Because this limited person is Atma. That's why we say it is thought by thought, emotion by emotion that has to be looked at. But no, I don't accept that. I want to bypass this. I want to bypass this person, the very person that is already a fact, that is already the truth. I want to bypass that person and go to some different reality over there. That's how nonsensical this is. So accommodating the very person who's trying to understand the big vision. That very person needs to be accommodated. Look into oneself, ask, what parts of myself am I not happy with? That's what you work with. That's the real work. But we don't get told this. We just get told about Brahman, Atma, all these keywords we get told. But the real work is address this ordinary, common, limited person with apparent limitations and learn to accommodate every part of him or her. Thought by thought, emotion by emotion. That's the real work. Value 5, Arjavam, straightforwardness. Ask, how large or small is the gap between my internal world and my external world? The person that you present yourself on the outside, how much does that person reflect the person you're understanding about yourself on the inside? When I say inside is, if I say, for example, I love you, so, common phrase. Okay. But what does that phrase represent? How close is that phrase when we say that actually relating to our true feelings towards this person to whom we said, I love you? Today, if you say, I love you, or how's it going? It's like just a mechanical phrase. How's it going? I love you. Just for the sake of satisfaction. But is there any real meaning behind that? That's what straightforwardness is. How large or close is what I say and what I think? Easy to say things, but how do I really mean it? Do you really mean it? Therefore, straightforwardness is reducing that gap, so that whatever is going on inside is exactly the person that you are on the outside. There's no distinction there. Total integrity between the inside and the outside. Nothing to hide. How about giving feedback? Give me feedback. Yeah, you're fantastic, beautiful, this, that. But inside, my true thoughts are very much different to what I said on the outside. Therefore, I'm not being straight with you. So Arjavam is straightforwardness, minimizing that huge gap that initially starts. And what's the solution to building Arjavam in our lives? Whenever you recognize an inconsistency between what you feel or think and what you say or do, then next time catch yourself, pause before replying. Just pause intentionally, deliberately. Yes, honey, I'll be home at 5 o'clock. Actually, now that I think about it, the traffic could be there. There could be some roadblocks. I'm intending to come at 5 o'clock. I will do my best to come at 5 o'clock, but more realistically now, having thought about it, it will probably be between 5 and 5:30. That is one step better than just impulsively saying 5 o'clock. Okay, so in other words, we're pausing, thinking just 1 or 2 seconds longer, and then replying. We're assessing how close is what I'm about to say to the actual reality, and then you reply. Value 6, Acharyopasanam. When we fall in love, that person is in our head. We can't get him out. Do we want him to leave our heads? Probably not. So whatever that person with whom we have a strong, when I say falling in love, I mean a strong emotional connection with, whatever that person represents, if that person is in your head, whatever qualities they have that also is in your head. Now tell me, do you have a book or a YouTube video in your head as you walk throughout the day? Do you have like this, this YouTube video that just stays throughout your whole life? One video. Or a book. You're walking around, going shopping mall, or you're in a discussion, and suddenly a book appears in front of you. A book called How to Communicate. A book of wisdom. Does that happen? No. What sticks in our minds? People. So what's the purpose of a teacher? The teacher represents the scriptures. The scriptures are speaking of the truth. If we have an emotional connection with the teacher, that teacher appears in our minds like a friend. That teacher being associated to the scriptures, we also keep the scriptures in our minds. A video certainly isn't going to cut it. It may stay an inspirational video like a TED Talk, but it doesn't stick. It doesn't have the sticking power. What has the sticking power? People. That's the purpose of the teacher. And that's how this tradition works. Whenever she appears in my head, my teacher, all of her teachings simultaneously appear in my mind. That would not happen by learning from a YouTube video, a recording, because we're human beings. We relate to other human beings, not to dry text. Sure, dry text and YouTube videos does have a purpose for follow-up, but the real work comes through a connection with the teacher. Value 7, Shaucham. Outer purity. Is your workspace organized? Is it inviting? Is it colorful? Does it smell nice? Is it fresh? Make the space more study-worthy. Internal. Whenever an unfair thought comes, unfair thought means a thought which you yourself would not want someone to think about you, right? So if you have an unfair thought towards something or someone, then you just understand this person or thing is a result of many causes, known and unknown. Those causes which they have control, but also they don't have control. Because of that, they are the person that they are. Just like you're a result of many known and unknown causes, many things that you do have control and you don't have control. Is that right? Yeah. Just like everyone else. So whenever an unfair thought comes towards someone, recognize they're a product of known and unknown causes. And that's what makes them the way they are. They're not going to change. That's how they are. And I need to accommodate that. That's called pratipaksha bhavana. A different standpoint, a different view, coming to understand where the person's coming from. Not false, they're great, it's pulling out positive qualities. It's not about, it's understanding where is the person coming from. Value 8, Stairyam, steadfastness. Celebrities when they come out of a car and they roll out a red carpet. So what is steadfastness? This is rolling out a beautiful carpet of commitment and then refusing to step off that carpet. Why would you? Because that carpet, what does that carpet stand for? What am I committed to? If you're clear, what do I stand for? What values are holding this carpet together? This carpet of commitment. If you know that, why would you want to step off that carpet? If that carpet is always leading towards the destination. So therefore, a carpet of commitment is leading towards the destination, just like in the celebrities, they roll the carpet towards the room they're about to enter. Now, a carpet, imagine you have a carpet in your house. Does that require cleaning? Maintenance? Yeah. Imagine a carpet gets smelly, dirty. If you're like getting off the carpet, yeah, very much. I want to get off the carpet. Therefore, commitment needs to be maintained. It needs to be looked into, it needs to be reevaluated. How do we reevaluate our commitment to our growth, our path of evolution? You ask yourself, what am I committed to? What specifically am I committed to? Define it. And then why am I committed to it? What am I committed to and why am I committed to it? Let's give some examples. In reference to a relationship, it could be a relationship with a client that you're working with, a business partner, or an intimate relationship. What does it mean to apply commitment in a relationship? It means there is a shared platform upon which both can walk on, right? And they're both maintaining that platform because, as we said, every carpet gets dirty. Therefore, commitment is not a one-off. It needs to be reevaluated, reassessed. What is our common purpose? And what is our common vision? Ongoing efforts. That's what holds the carpet upon which both are walking on together, clean, maintained. What is our shared vision? What does this carpet of commitment represent for us? What is the foundation, the platform which we are both walking on? What values holds this carpet of commitment together? Do we know? So what is this carpet of commitment about, and why am I committed to it? We need to know that. Commitment in regards to a wedlock. What's the purpose in a wedlock? According to the scriptures, there's only one purpose for a wedlock, no other, and that is self-growth for the sake of liberation. That is it. Wedlock, self-growth for the sake of liberation. It is a means, not the end. When the relationship becomes the end, then one has lost perspective, according to the scriptures. So relationship is there to cause us to inquire into our responses. For example, it lets you know, how accommodative are you? Easy to talk accommodation, but how accommodative am I towards a different perspective? Therefore, it forces us to reflect on our responses. Now, when a relationship turns into the end, then what happens? Then demands start, right? You're supposed to fulfill my needs. You're supposed to be like this. No, you're supposed to be like this, because the person has lost perspective. Even though they're committed, that's not good enough. You still need to know, what is this carpet heading towards? One may have a commitment towards sustaining the family. That's okay. The other may have a commitment towards liberation. That's also okay. But the carpet needs to be maintained by both. Now, where the conflicts come is sometimes we say, no, you're supposed to be following my path. You're supposed to do exactly what I'm doing. This is wrong understanding, because everyone has their own Swadharma, their own trajectory. All that matters is that carpet has to be maintained by both. But the direction towards which that carpet's going, that can be different for two individuals. You probably heard of the case recently with Bill and Melinda. They're split. Quite a surprise, right? Got to respect them. I mean, it's quite a wise decision. I mean, they're openly stated, our chapter has ended. We're no longer sharing a common vision, a common purpose. Our carpet is going way apart. Therefore, we're making an assertive choice to end it. Steadfastness is also Swadharma. What is Swadharma? Swadharma is understanding that this is an interconnected world. What I do matters. What you say matters. What you do matters. People are like, like babies. They observe. We learn from other people's behaviors. So everything we do matters. It counts. You affect the world in the long run, but you also affect yourself. So what is Swadharma? Taking responsibility. The light of Dharma is shining on every single mind in the world. There's not one individual where the light of Dharma, universal Dharma, is not shining. Because of that alone, everyone has a duty. Duty, responsibility to themselves, that's called Swadharma, but also to their immediate surroundings, that is also called Swadharma. To not understand this, what's the product of that? Protests. Just recently, we have a lockdown, protest immediately. Refusing, what does a lockdown have anything to do with the individual? So what does it mean to not understand that this world is interconnected and that you as an individual have a duty, a responsibility to the society? To understand it is to immerse yourself in your specific duty. To not understand it is to keep on giving power to the government. It's them, it's the president, it's the economy. Like someone else has an authority. But the light of Dharma, the one light of Ishvara, is shining on every single mind. Because of that, every person has an equal duty to their immediate surroundings. To not understand that, the product of that is protests. Swadharma and relationship. Swadharma changes because you change as a person. So this means the script also has to change. So in Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, formerly, In their situation, their script has changed because their Swadharma has changed because they have changed. And therefore, they took the decision of parting ways. That is also a possibility. So if we don't understand this, then what do? We say, no, I want things to be how they used to be 5 years ago. No matter how hard we try, it's not going to work because that's a fantasy. Life is showing us clouds or sometimes the sun, but we want it to be something else that is not accommodating what is going on in the script. So therefore, the script has to continue changing. That's the nature of life, evolution. And because it changes, the person needs to reevaluate their carpet of commitment. What values do I stand for? Do I even stand for these values anymore? If not, then sometimes we need to make a decision to part ways. That's why I say that's also a choice. Value 9, Atma Vinigraha, mastery or management of the mind. Atma, in this case, does not mean the self, it means the Antahkarana, the mind. So management of the mind. First of all, what's the difference between mastering the mind and control of the mind?
If you're a master of your mind, there's not any situation that you're not able to deal with. I think you're a lot more creative and you're taking all of your environment, surroundings, people, etc. into account, whereas a technique is just a formula that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work.
Mastery would be perhaps based on an understanding of the mechanisms that are going on. Control is just a quick fix technique.
Absolutely, absolutely. Goknur?
What I was thinking is when you're trying to control something, there's some sort of resistance there that you're trying to change. So when you're a master, there's nothing that is resisting.
Control implies that I'm not willing to accommodate my current state of mind, and I'm willing to make some changes with my state of mind, maybe some substances or whatever, a technique, and I'm trying to get rid of it temporarily. So control is more concerned with immediate gratification, quick fix. But mastery is a lot harder. And like everyone was absolutely right, mastery involves confronting every emotion, looking into the unconscious, the internal voice of unconscious, taking time to investigate into different thoughts. The question is, how do we master the mind? Because we don't want to control the mind, but master the mind. Firstly, need to understand 4 types of thinking that we all undergo. And the intention here is to go from, to just recognize and then go to the highest stage. The first type of thinking is instinctive or impulsive. This is not amygdala, fight, flight, or freeze, instinctive, impulsive. This is the impulsive, whereby we have this quick need to, it's an unconscious coloring of the world. Prejudices, quick bias. This is how things are, full stop. It's that quick, immediate painting of how things are, and then we're satisfied with that conclusion. In other words, it's an unexamined belief system, right? We picked it up somewhere in the childhood and maybe culturally from someone or somewhere. And we haven't taken time to really ask what's the real truth behind that. So it grew in our minds through the course of time. And now it's become this belief system. It's become this color through which we are looking at the world. And therefore it's automatic, it's impulsive, it's emotional. There's an emotion behind it. For example, good woman is a submissive woman. Where does that come from? Strong men are emotionless, except joy and anger. Where does that come from? Right? So these are belief systems. These are small notions picked up, and then we don't look through them. And they modify our behavior. Oh, you're not submissive, you're not a good woman. Next. Lost opportunity. Same for the other sex. So therefore, they modify our behaviors, and we don't even have the chance to capture them. How do you recognize that this kind of type is operating? Suppose there's an emotional, unconscious, level 1, impulsive thinking, and you just find yourself going, blah. How do you recognize that it is level 1? After we go, blah, we won't feel easy about what just happened. We won't feel easy about it. Like, ooh, could have I done better? Could have I said better? Was that really appropriate? Right? There's a dis-ease about it. You don't feel quite congruent, kind of doubtful about it, because it came from emotion. Someone triggered you and then just went through all of your cognitive filters. So whenever you feel uneasy, that is exactly what to write down and look into it. Level 2. Level 2 is opposite to level 1. So we all start as youngsters. Most of us are in level 1, right? Impulsive. Level 2 is opposite. This is when we're done a lot of that youthful kind of impulsiveness, and now we're set in stone. Adults, mechanical, habitual. Totally opposite. Emotion is no place for emotion. Just act like a robot, right? How's it going? How's it going? How's it going? How's it going? Same tone, same voice, everyone. Not even taking time to look at Lorena, Luciana. Okay, let me first address you as a human being. Let me see your facial expressions. How is your day? Okay. Now I respond based on that. No, it's just mechanical, based on what I've done before. Therefore, no imagination or variety is required in mechanical, because it's a repeated thought from the past. So in reference to that repeated thought, we have lost our free will. Because free will only comes when you are free to think how it's being done. But there's no question of thinking here. It's just a repeated thought. Therefore, in reference to that specific thought, we have lost our free will. Rubik's Cube, 4 seconds. Memorize an algorithm. Keep practicing the algorithm 1,000 times. That's called mechanical. No use of creativity, imagination. So it looks impressive on the outside, but it is just following an algorithm, a formula, and repeating it. If I see 3 yellow blocks followed by a blue block, then turn it 5 ways to the left, turn the opposite side 5 times to the right, follow that, and you'll get the Rubik's Cube done in a couple of seconds. No need to be creative or to think. Just memorize the algorithm and get maybe 2 million views on YouTube or something like that. Looks impressive, but behind it, it is mechanical. Maybe 30 plus minus, huh? We settle into this because it's easy. There's no need to think. Just kind of like, settle into, oh, I've done it before. Life is so good. But the more we do this, the more our brain just keeps on dying little by little, right? So we need to engage our minds all the time. Something that really challenges you. Type 3, this is deliberate. This is what all of the mindfulness talks are about. This is where we want to have both of them ultimately come to. Deliberate thinking is consciously, deliberately, alertfully thinking about every step of the way, what is being done right now, right now, right now, right now. This involves the use of our prefrontal cortex, the newest part of our brains, according to our evolution. That's why it's used less and least today, because it's the newest part of the brain that requires most thinking. And this is the kind of thinking that Vedanta requires the most. And this involves deliberately introducing new thoughts and replacing old ones. Hard work. Mechanical, easy, just settle into the behavior. Type 1 is even easier, just kind of, let yourself free. But level 3, very hard, because it requires consistent alertfulness onto what is happening right now. Now. Yeah, even now, right? Ongoing. So this requires practice. We need to help our brains, to remind our brains to constantly remain alertful, engaged, so that it becomes eventually the last level where enjoyment happens, level 4, spontaneous thinking. Suppose you're practicing for a dance many years, grueling hard work, like a ballerina, staying on your toes, falling over. People sometimes laugh at you, right, for making mistakes or something. It doesn't matter what the hobby is. It could be anything. But you are practicing hard every day. When does the real enjoyment come? When does the real reward of that come? After it is so practiced, so ingrained that it becomes autopilot, that you're not even thinking about what's being done. It's just flowing. That's when you can let yourself go and you are driven almost by a divine intelligence. You don't need to be involved there. It just happens on its own. This is called the flow. This is what all sports people are looking for, being in the flow. The enjoyer and the thinker is temporarily forgotten. They let themselves go and let this spontaneity flow through them. That's when Ishvara can be fully alive, because I'm not intercepting with my own thinking. What should happen? What needs to come next? No. Go a little one step before. Okay, now do a little bit faster. All of that narrative is gone. Therefore, the mind is free to shine the light of Ishvara on it. And therefore, the person is in that state of flow. They forget themselves. What makes a really good, whatever occupation you have, a really good medical professor or a teacher or a researcher or a builder or an architect, what makes a real good profession? Having gone through the pain for years and years and years. And this is what we all aspire to. This is when we see someone on TV, you know, totally lost in their dance, in their song, in their art. And we say, wow, what are you saying wow to? You're saying wow to years and years of grueling hard work, falling over, being laughed at. Wasn't pleasant at all. But we don't see that in the background. We only see the person who is totally in the flow. Next method, or the other method to master the mind, is through our yoga Shastra. We talked about this in chapter 6 of the Gita, the Ashtanga Yoga 8 Steps by Patanjali. This is a system exclusively designed for Atma Vinigraha, mastery of the mind. For example, we got Yama Niyama, sure, that's the do's and don'ts. But let's go into the asana, taming your body to be oriented to your thinking. Because sometimes our body does one thing, but our thinking is somewhere else. So there's a disconnect there, like tapping your foot or something on the ground, impatient. If you're the real driver of yourself, then your body will obey you. So what is asana? Making the body obedient to the thinker. So there's a total congruency there. What I think is how I move, how fast you move, how slow you move. All of that represents your internal state of mind. Then we got pranayama. Pranayama is mastery of our physiological systems, especially breathing. Is it not true when we're anxious, our breathing changes? Absolutely. Our digestion is even affected. When we're anxious, then sometimes even stomach ulcers come. So pranayama is mastering the breath. To master the breath is to master your thinking, because breath and thinking are directly correlated. Much harder to master the mind. So what they do is they say asana easiest, right? Because asana, you got your physical, tangible body to work with. A little bit harder is your breath, helping your mind through breathing. A little bit harder is pratyahara. Pratyahara is mastery of the perception organs, because perception organs have the need to focus on external things, right? Hear outside sounds. Oh, there's a car passing by. Oh, it's annoying. It's agitating me. Oh, someone's talking. I cannot focus. What does this show about our minds? Constantly tune outwards. So what's pratyahara? Every time we hear something, it serves as a reminder to go inwards. Just focus inwards. There's an airplane flying over. Okay. Thank you, airplane reminder. Go inwards. Look at it. Baby's crying. Okay, going. Okay, in that case, you probably go and address the baby. So, in other words, every external stimuli is for the sake of reminding you to focus inwards on some object. What kind of object? That is when dharana comes to play. What's dharana? Finding an object that you love. Not a monster. You don't want something that scares you, but something that you love. Maybe it could be a nose of someone. It could be some object. Rubik's Cube, right? And you put a Rubik's Cube in your mind and you keep on focusing on that. What's going to happen? The mind's going to keep on going outwards. It wants to say, no, Rubik's, okay, give me something better than Rubik's Cube, please. We will take a apple. Okay, apple, that's better. Now, what the mind wants to do, it wants to replace the apple with a pear. What do? You bring it back to the apple. It wants to put two eyes on the apple. No. You raise those eyes, apple. It wants to turn the apple into a head. No. Bring back the apple. In other words, training the mind to stay with the original intention. So choose an object of your love that you really adore, that's personal to you. because it's much easier to focus on something that you love than we don't have a connection to, and put it in front of your mind. See it in your mind, visualize it. Keep it there as long as possible, but set a time, 10 minutes ideally. Otherwise, the mind's going to be thinking about when's this going to end. So therefore, set a time. And notice how this image wants to keep changing. The proportion to how much it changes is the proportion to how much this mind actually needs more concentrating power to be developed. Because the higher the concentrating power, the more we can keep that object intact without it disappearing, appearing with a different thought, reappearing, being replaced by someone else, by some memory from yesterday, for different colors. Keep it there as long as possible and keep training until it's able to stay there for 10 minutes. When I tried this years ago, doing some Kriya Yoga, my instruction was 5 seconds, easy, close. 1 second, already different. Oh, I'm sorry, you said apple. Oh, sorry, I thought it was a pear. In other words, before I even started, it already changed into something else. That's how quickly the mind changes into something else. Therefore, we need to extend. So you started 5 seconds, apple, 5 seconds. Okay, green, green. And you can see it in stem, some object that you can really concretely visualize in the color. Okay, 5, done. And then 10 seconds. When we do this long enough, what happens? Dhyanam. Dhyanam is the next stage. This is whereby having done it long enough, it becomes now a lot easier. The frequency of changes of that apple becomes less and less. Therefore, we become at more ease with the object in our minds, the object of meditation. So all that means is dharana and dhyana. What's the difference? Dharana is that initial stage, putting the apple, where there's a lot of movement. Dhyana just means having kept that object in my mind for a while, it is now there. It doesn't change so much. That's the only difference between dharana and dhyanam. Having that object in the mind long enough, what happens then? Samadhi. I forget myself. The meditator and the meditated, in that place, I can't even say that there is a difference or no difference. I can only say that once the samadhi has left. Forgetting that there is a doer, enjoyer, that there is a meditator. So what does this mean in respect to practice? The proportion to which how quickly one can get into samadhi from a place of asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyanam, samadhi is a proportion to how clear and how well exercised is the mind. So therefore, the entire purpose of the yoga system is to develop and advance the concentrating power of our minds. And that's the purpose of Ashtanga Yoga. So Ashtanga Yoga is not for self-knowledge. It is to prepare, qualify the mind for self-knowledge. Self-knowledge comes from the Upanishads, but the yoga system is there to help us to have a mind that obeys to us.
How does Samadhi helps in mastering the mind?
It's more useful to look at samadhi as a gauge how purified the mind already is. Because the more the focused the mind is, the more it is able to forget its outside environment and just focus on one thing at a time. So samadhi is more of a gauge rather than a means to some end. It is not a means to anything. It's just a byproduct of having trained your mind to focus on and on and on. In fact, if you want to write a book, Mina, for example, as some experience of doing work, right? Maybe an Excel spreadsheet, you forget the environment, you forget the dog, you forget you're just totally immersed. That's called samadhi. And what does that reflect? It just reflects that you have spent long enough, you gave your mind long enough time to focus on one thing at a time. Therefore, it is a lovely indicator how quickly you're able to concentrate. And that comes from practice of asana, pratyahara, pranayama, dharana, and dhyanam.
I was just going to say, you could say it's the difference between allowing your thoughts and emotions to run off on their own track with the mind, and you just follow behind and either enjoy them or don't enjoy them, or like them or don't like them in one direction, or using dharana as you said, as the preparation for being able to stop the mind from being hijacked and actually bring it back to a point where you are focused internally on a stillness, which will then bring you into a position of mastery of the mind.
So what's the purpose of this dharana, dhyana, samadhi? Can we not just develop this through sports or just getting into some activity really deeply, like painting or drawing or whatever you like to do? When it comes to self-knowledge, because this is mastery in reference to self-knowledge specifically, then dhyana, dharana, and samadhi become extremely important because they allow your mind to be clear throughout the day, throughout all situations. And that requires, why? Because you're able to think, you're able to inquire consistently, you're able to discern the subtle realities. Now, what is discerning subtle realities between the self and not self, other than concentrating power, staying with it? Because if I focus on for example, one object, and I want to clearly get the nature of that object, but my mind's going elsewhere. But what was my initial attention? To discern the object from the substratum, the atma from the anatma. But now, just by focusing on anatma, an object of appearance, my mind's already changing that into some different appearance. Why? Because I haven't trained my mind to stay with one object.
I believe that the power to focus is naturally inbuilt in us. For example, when we go to sleep every night, we just focus on sleep, and only then we get back to sleep. Or the other observation is, whatever activity that we are interested in, our mind automatically is focused on it. So if I'm interested in self-knowledge, I think I would have that capability of focusing into that direction. If I'm interested in watching Netflix, I can watch Netflix for 8 hours. So that capability of focusing that gets triggered from our likings, whatever I like, I have to focus naturally in that activity. Then why is dharana, dhyana, samadhi is specifically required in self-knowledge if I'm already interested in it and my mind is naturally focused towards it?
Sure. Again, because see, there's two ways of focusing. There's focusing on worldly, as I said, anatma, mithya appearances. That means we're using our concentration to do our work very well. But when it comes to discernment of the appearance and the substratum behind the appearances, then you need a much subtler mind. Then the kind of focus that we have for Netflix isn't good enough, because what kind of focus is that? It's gross focus. It is a focus of the gross intellect, but we need a much subtler focus, much subtler concentration to be able to inquire properly. And that's the purpose of meditation, Patanjali's system.
Next question is what is the difference between these two kinds of focus, like gross focus on material objects and focus on
the subtle reality? See,
right.
I mean, unless one practices, then it's kind of like, we're only talking about gross. So what's the difference? So, okay, what color is, suppose I show you two colors, red and blue, and you say, okay, red and blue. That's very easy. But what if I show you, okay, identify the difference between joy and contentment, for example. Okay, what's the difference there? Or let's say even harder, identify the difference for me between yourself and modification of yourself, right? So very easy, black and white. And I keep on going more subtle and subtle and subtle. So that subtle requires a different kind of training of the mind. And samadhi can definitely help. Dharana can definitely help. It's not the only method. That's why I say it's just one of the methods. It's not the only method. Values is another method. By practicing living your values through karma yoga, that's another method. Suppose you're in pain right now, and I don't pick that up. Why? Because I'm so used to discerning the gross. I'm probably looking at, things like, oh, okay, you look pretty fine. But inside you're like, no, I'm not fine. How can I pick that up? Only by having a subtle sensitivity, a subtle cues, and that requires training. So in that same way, how do we discern the changing from the non-changing Atma from the Atma? We need to make the intellect highly, highly subtle.
I have one more question on the methods of thinking, the thinking ways that you mentioned. The first one is, what is the difference between instinctive thinking and spontaneous thinking?
Instinctive thinking is uninformed thinking, uninquired into thinking. He or she's like this. This is called rumors. And you go, oh yeah, cool, I believe you. And then we just spread that rumor. Spontaneous is having gone through thinking, different angles, having looked into it, different perspectives. On the basis of your deliberate inquiry, reflection, on and on and on through years, it becomes now spontaneous. So therefore, your brain is now spontaneously inquirous, spontaneously reflective. You're not going, hold on, let me reflect about what's happening. It's just automatic. No matter what happens, it is thinking about layers upon layers into everything.
Spontaneous means the mind is already mastered.
Yeah, exactly.
And instinctive is it's still work in progress.
Yes.
The other question was, you said that when we feel uneasy after giving a response, that means we are giving impulsive response, right? Or instinctive response.
A possible indicator, yes. Sometimes it's guilt, also guilt. Sometimes we did the right thing, but there's guilt mixed in with that. There's also a possibility. I will talk about guilt in another session.
My observation usually, especially in examination situation, the first thought and the first answer is always the right answer, even though I feel uneasy, after giving that response. And when I think a lot, what should be the answer to that particular question, it usually gets, wrong. But when I overthink, my answers are usually wrong. But my first response, the impulsive one, the instinctive one, is usually the right one.
For example, you can say, how many of these impulsiveness responses were having a transformative effect on my life? Right? How many of them were in a more serious situation? Never mind just an exam, but like a more like, you have to really address something in real life, in a stressful situation. How many of them were helpful in the future? How many of them were really, there to, benefiting both parties? You can say that. Not many. Okay, so then maybe I can introduce a little bit of thinking, maybe 1 extra second of thinking. Doesn't have to be 10 seconds, whereby you say, oh, okay, now it's going to be a wrong answer, but just 1 extra little, thought into it. So there's always that variation. I'm not saying it's definitive. Yeah. And as I said, also it could be guilt mixed in. Like you say the right thing, but you say, oh, I feel guilty for hurting them because I don't want to hurt people. And like, oh, but no, they said that if there's uneasiness, then it's probably instinctive. But it's not instinctive. It was fully thoughtful. So as I say, it's not black or white. It's always mixed in.
I was just going to say, it just sounds like all of the, particularly the Ashtanga Yoga, isn't it also to make your mind sattvic? Because only a sattvic mind can appreciate and understand the Vedanta properly.
Absolutely. Our minds are naturally sattvic. In fact, when we talk about the creation, the nature, the dominant guna of the mind is sattvic. This will be chapter 14, of course. And what makes the mind non-sattvic? So when I say sattvic, I'm just saying like a mirror, a mirror that's able to reflect the sunlight. What makes the mind non-sattvic is our own notions, our own impulsiveness, our own natures of how things should be, how things shouldn't be. So we put those dots, those little papers of filters, and then the mind is shining through those filterings. And therefore it makes a wrong conclusion. And it sees that conclusion as normal. That's how things are. So we're just simply removing those layers. In fact, the next value, Vairagyam, is very this topic about making the mind more sattvic. So how do we make the mind more sattvic? Value 10, Indriyar Teshu Vairagyam, dispassion towards objects. Oh, okay, you see the word service, like cleaning, cooking, gardening, but it seems that you explain this fellow more as trust, faith, love of the teacher, but not the kind of blind faith just because you happen to like them, but you think about what they're saying and it makes sense, and then you listen to more, right? So there's a connection, there's a relationship there. So it's more like relationship with the teacher, intelligent relationship that involves asking questions, just kind of conversing like with a friend.
An intuitive connection rather than blind faith.
exactly, intuitive connection, that you feel easy with them. Sometimes you may not feel easy, but there's still that general connection that you're able to relate to.
Indriya means a sense organ, and Artha stands for object. Vairagya, dispassion, comes from the word raga, passion or desire joined to the negative prefix. Thus, Indriya deshtu, Vairagyam means dispassion towards the objects of the sense organs, or the absence of a compelling drive for worldly pleasures and possessions. Raga is more than just a fancy or preference. It is a craving for something. One who is free from such cravings is called a Vairagin, and the state of his mind, bhava, is called dispassion, Vairagya. What does dispassion mean? Does it mean putting a barrier between sense objects and me? Should I turn my head away, not look or listen when there is something that fascinates me? No, dispassion is not a state of inner suppression. It is a serene state of mind characterized by total objectivity towards the things of the world, the objects of the senses. Dispassion is not suppression of desire. Dispassion and self-suppression are contradictory states of the mind. They are mutually exclusive. Self-suppression is predicated on the presence of passion to be overpowered or crushed. In dispassion, there is nothing there that requires suppression. No compelling desires command the mind of the Vairagin. How can a mind be freed from compelling desires? How can I gain a dispassionate disposition? Dispassion is gained by clearly seeing objects for what they are, by seeing without subjective distortion how objects relate to me, to my happiness and welfare.
Thank you. Kaya?
Vairagya is an important value, one that must be understood correctly. Much nonsense is written about Vairagya, leading to confusion. Vairagya is a state of mind brought about by understanding, not a state of mind compelled by a commitment to self-denial or deprivation. Vairagya is not born out of fear or teeth-clenched effort of will, but is born of sheer understanding. It is a knowledge produced by observation, inquiry, and analysis. I question why and what I desire and what I achieve by fulfilling my desires. The understanding born of this analysis reduces the world to an objective fact for me, releases it from the tangle of my own subjectivity, the tangles of my likes and dislikes that bind me to situational happiness.
Let's talk about what is Vairagyam or dispassion not. It is not distancing oneself from the material world to be closer to the spiritual world, because there's no such division. That division only exists in the mind. Where's the edges of the material and the spiritual world, right? So this is something that we set up in our minds. It is not a state of mind where nothing affects you. Liberated or not, the jiva still carries the four koshas. The four koshas are made to respond to the environment. We can't stop this. Pain will be felt either way. Pleasure will be felt either way. Four koshas are carried around, so is whatever emotions and thoughts that are to ensue from them. We cannot get rid of this as long as the person is alive. It is not about having no desires. When do desires end? Death. Oh, I have a desire towards this. Oh, I'm not spiritual. Something's wrong with me. Help. No. Desires will keep on coming because as long as prarabdha karma is coming, it will keep on modifying thoughts reflective of that prarabdha karma. And they will reflect desires from the past in the present. So what's the proper attitude towards this? Despite desires, one is not compelled to chase them. Why? Because one understands the limited nature of objects. For example, that object cannot give me final fulfillment. It cannot give me permanent fulfillment. My own mood will determine or dictate how much I can enjoy myself with that object. And that object is subject to change also. Once I get it, there's maintenance. Oh, I got the house. Now I have to maintain and clean the house. Hard work, right? So we're not putting down, we're just seeing what is actually the nature of this object? It's limited. It's not about building repulsions towards the world or objects. Because to build repulsion is a violation of shaucham. Only an impure mind has the need to degrade things. It's also a violation of ahimsa, because that's actually technically ill will towards things. So it's not about degrading the world or degrading things or anything, but just asking, what can this object do for me and what can it not do for me? That's called objectivity. You're clear. What can it really do for me and can it not do for me? When we lose that question, we lose perspective. Therefore, we start to have an incorrect relationship with that object because we never took the time. What can it actually give and what can it not give? Instead, we just generalize it. It can give me everything. And therefore, it becomes the object of pursuit, no matter what. Vairagyam is not a state attained after substance ingestion. You know, when the person's like high and then there's no problems anywhere. It is also not a state, temporary state achieved at a funeral. Someone close to us dies and we're like, oh man, life is so short. It gets taken away from us like that. I need to reevaluate my priorities. What's the point of it all? Ah, man, why am I chasing all of this? And someone tells us, hey, I'll cheer you up. Come tonight and we'll have a drink. And then we're back to normal like nothing ever happened. Smashana Vairagyam, temporary. So it's not a temporary state of mind. Rather, it is a permanent understanding. It's a permanent state of mind coming out of what? Understanding about the nature of these objects. Therefore, there's no need to involve oneself in them. Understanding what's the nature of this experience. By evaluating, assessing the nature of the experience, then you reprioritize your life according to your new understandings. So what is Vairagyam? Reprioritizing life according to my evaluation about the worth of objects. What is their real worth? And then we make some adjustments. We neither get more or less, we just make a few adjustments based on our reassessment of the true value of the object on the basis of what it can do and not do for me. Vairagyam, another word for it is viraga. So I'll take viraga because it's easy to understand. Vi means to depart. That's a prefix. Raga, the root is ranj. Ranj means to color. Therefore, what is viraga or vairagyam? It is to depart from the need to color in the world, to color in objects with my own biases, to project the value onto an object which it inherently does not have. The object is a template, and that template becomes either useful, valuable, or non-valuable based on my projections. It's got nothing to do with the object. So I turned that object, a value-neutral object, into a huge desire worthy of pursuit, only because of my coloring in through biases, what it means and it doesn't mean. For now, let us revise the names. Value 1, amanitvam, absence of conceit. Value 2, adambhitvam, absence of pretense, adding details. Value 3, ahimsa, deliberate thoughts, words, and actions. Value 4, kshantihi, accommodation of the external environment, but also of your internal state of mind. Value 5, arjavam, straightforwardness. Value 6, acharyopasanam, service to the teacher. Value 7, shaucham, inner and outer purity. Value 8, I think it's now stairyam, straightforwardness. Value 9, atma vinigraha, which is mastery of the mind. Value 10, viraga or vairagyam, dispassion towards sense objects, which will make more sense next week. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.